Hey guys, welcome along to a new episode of Sceammeupbotty. We're getting into some more Star Trek, the original series. This one here is Season 1, Episode 4, The Naked Time. This one here is one I haven't seen in, years at this point. And I forgot just how good this one was. But it's got those elements from the series that you know as soon as you see it. Sulu running around with the fencing sword, tormenting people. There's some really funny stories from on set from the research I've been doing in the episode. Sulu, when he falls victim to this virus, the way it affects you is it kind of makes you go a little bit crazy, and it reveals that his deepest self, he sees himself as a swashbuckler. So George Takei, he had to learn how to handle a sword in a hurry. He had never done it before, needed to do it for this episode. So when he was not needed on the set, he'd be practicing fencing, frequently lunging at members of the crew as they were passing by. Like you see in the episode where he chases the two guys down the corridor of the Enterprise with the sword, like on set, behind the scenes. Apparently he was doing this stuff all the time to everybody and anybody. And then a delegation actually got together, called Gene Roddenberry, and threatened that the entire crew would quit if Sulu was ever given a sword again. So it's little stories they got there that just makes you see the fun that production and stuff like this can be. That's why I, as a zero budget indie filmmaker, aspiring filmmaker, let's say, like I've done 6 up to this point, technically 7, but 6 of my own. It's just so much fun getting together to make something like that there. And little stories I guess here just reinforces that to me all the time. Anyway, as far as the plot of the show goes, the episode The Naked Time, the Enterprise arrives at the planet Psi 2000. They're there to observe and document the planet's breakup. It's in its final days. It's about to explode. And they're there to retrieve a research team that was stationed on the planet. And at the beginning of the episode, Mr. Spock and Lieutenant Junior Grade Joe Tormolin, I want to say, I can't remember how they pronounced that name on the show, they beam down and they find the researchers' life support system on their station has been shut down. The entire team's frozen to death. Like they discover one guy in the shower, but he's fully clothed. One seated at a control console, as if nothing was wrong, and one who was strangled. Tormolin removes his environmental suit glove to scratch his nose while he's down there. Fatal mistake. And comes in contact with a strange red liquid, and it looks really good on screen the way this liquid affects him, or infects him I should say, because he's crouched down to do something and the entire place is frozen. There's ice everywhere, and his bare hand is on like the leg of a console, and the liquid jumps up towards his hand, like rolls up towards his hand. And it's a simple visual effect where they just tilted the camera. So when they shot it originally, it was just the liquid was running directly down towards his hand, but then they just flipped the image over to its side slightly, or a little bit more than slightly, so it looked like it was running kind of up towards his hand. But just for such a simple effect, very, very effective in the show. So good. I love it whenever you get little pieces of visual things on there that look amazing, but just whenever you start to learn the tricks of the trade and you discover how it was done, you're just like, That's flipping amazing. And it's all part of the fun, learning that stuff as well. Need to do this more often. I haven't created any of my own projects in quite a few years now, and hopefully get back to that at some point. But back to Star Trek. I'm going off on serious tangents here, but I suppose it's good for you guys that are going to be listening to this episode to get to know me a little bit better personally. And if you want to do that, you can go to the website, coinsagemedia.com, or the YouTube channels. You can get me on either that or the podcast. Everything I'm doing is through the website, like YouTube channels, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's an hour tangent. Shut up, Rodney. Get back to the episode. So the land party, they've been back to the ship, and they're examined by Dr. McCoy after getting decontaminated in the transporter room, and McCoy finds no medical issues with him and allows them to return to duty. But while having lunch, Tormolen begins to act irrationally, expressing hostility towards the other crew members. The big tip off to what was happening, or the telltale signs that he was infected by this virus, was he had itchy hands, and he was very uncomfortable. He was always forever looking at his hands, and he was scratching them and whatnot. So you see different members of the Enterprise crew going through the same sort of thing before they get fully infected by this virus. He begins acting irrationally, expressing hostility towards other crew members. He threatens Sulu and Rayleigh with a knife before turning on himself. But the wound, they're wrestling the knife off him, and they all fall to the ground, and the knife cuts into his stomach. So it's an accidental wound that actually gets him, but it's not life-threatening. But in sickbay, he dies after a successful surgery, to McCoy's bewilderment. Hasn't got a clue what's going on. He's like, this guy shouldn't be dying. Like, it does not make any sense. Both Sulu and Rayleigh, they also begin to behave irrationally. They're on the bridge of the Enterprise, and there's a maneuver that Enterprise has to do with the breakup of this planet. They have to be as close to it as possible to record everything that's going on and the breakup of the planet. So they're in orbit, but they're constantly flying around the planet. It's not a slow orbit. They're going fairly quickly, and what they have to do is maintain a certain altitude the entire time while this is happening. But when the planet starts to break down, its mass decreases slightly, which means whenever that starts happening, Enterprise will actually be a little bit higher than they need her to be. So they're constantly having to readjust everything to keep Enterprise in the orbit that it has to be in. And of course, they start getting affected by this virus, and Sulu decides, he says to Rayleigh, Sulu, he's at the helm, of course. Rayleigh, he's beside him, doing like navigating and all that sort of good stuff. Sulu's like, come on, go to the gym. Come on, go and have a bit of fun. Do a bit of fencing and whatnot. And Rayleigh, having more self-control at this point, tries to get Sulu to stay on the bridge. At this point, Kirk, he's down with McCoy, trying to work out what happened. Tormolen and Spock, he's that intently focused on what he's doing at his station. He doesn't see Sulu leaving the bridge. So Sulu goes off in one, and he ends up running about with the sword like a swashbuckler from the Three Musketeers. But we already sort of covered that at the beginning of the episode. Rayleigh reveals, whenever he starts going off in one, he revels in his Irish ancestry, and he goes off in one, locks himself into the engineering section, and proclaims himself captain of the Enterprise. Those whose skin they have touched will follow suit, and the infection quickly spreads throughout the crew. That's how it's transferred from person to person. It's simple as a touch. And McCoy figures this out fairly late in the episode. As everybody starts getting infected, they abandon their posts, and the ship's orbit destabilizes, and it falls into the planet's erratic gravity well. As the Enterprise enters the upper atmosphere, the hull begins to heat. So there's so many shots in this episode where Enterprise is losing her altitude, but she's doing it slowly. She's not going straight down, but she's constantly flying around the planet, and every time she's getting slightly lower and slightly lower. They've got something like 20 minutes before total destruction. And honestly, the visual effects on Star Trek now, if you're watching it on Netflix, everything's been upgraded from the original edits. New effects and new visuals. And that shot on the view screen of the planet as Enterprise is orbiting it, I actually got dizzy at one point. It's just you're seeing like the planet turning below Enterprise, and then the star field in the background. It's just, if that was in 3D, I would probably have thrown up. But yes, they're in trouble. Chief Engineer Scott regains control of engineering from Rayleigh, but Rayleigh has shut down the engines. There's a big part in this episode with them trying to get in to the engineering section, and they eventually do. They get Rayleigh out, but he's turned off the engines. He shut everything down, and it's going to be impossible to restart them by normal procedures before the Enterprise crashes into the planet. They've got something like 15 minutes at this point to get Enterprise out, and they need like a good half hour to start up the engines on Enterprise. Spock becomes infected when Nurse Chapel takes his hands and confesses her love to him. Spock struggles to contain his emotions. It's a fantastic scene whenever he's pretty much in a room on his own, fighting with his own emotions. It sounds simple enough, but it's acted incredibly well. He ends up infecting Captain Kirk when he tries to help him. McCoy, he's unaffected, still in his office studying blood samples from the patients and water from Sci 2000, and finds that the water from the planet possesses a previously undetected complex chain of molecules that affects humanoids like alcohol. So this, if memory serves, this does turn up in the Next Generation as well, I want to say. I'm really going by memory here. Like, there's so much Star Trek, and if it's on, I'll watch it. Like, for a show as old as this here, like, it's still running out in prime time. Not just the original series, but the Next Generation, Voyager, all that sort of stuff. And if I come across any of them, I'll watch them. So everything's out of sequence for me at times, but I do genuinely, in the back of my head, think that Next Generation has an episode similar to this, or it's very, very much connected to it. Anyway, it affects humans like alcohol, depressing the centres of judgment and self-control, and it's transmitted by touch, but he manages to develop a serum to reverse the effects, and administering the initial doses to the command crew to allow them to bring the ship back under control. Kirk orders Scott to make a full power restart of the warp engines, a dangerous process that mixes matter and antimatter in a cold state to create a controlled implosion and drive the ship away from the planet. And this is a risky manoeuvre. If it's not done right, they are going to blow Enterprise up, but they've got no option at this point. Like, they're going to essentially nosedive into this planet that's about to explode. So, they're screwed either way. They're going to have to make the decision to do this. This is suggested by Fury that a relationship between time and antimatter, but it has never before been attempted. The restart, that's successful, propelling Enterprise at impossible speed away from the planet into a space time warp that sends the ship back 71 hours in time. And Spock comments that they now know a way to travel back through time, and they could go anywhere at any time and do anything they want, sort of thing. Kirk's response is, "We may risk it someday, Mr. Spock." And they do. In one of the movies later on, The Voyage Home, they go back to get in the wheels. So there's a connection, another connection to the original series from the movies. So I love doing this podcast because I'm learning so much about Star Trek as well. Now, it's weird, like the fact that this is entitled The Naked Time, and they only had like a time warp for a matter of like a minute and a half at the end of the episode. Like nothing has anything to do with time up to that point. But in my research as well, it turns out that The Naked Time was originally intended to be a 2-part episode, with part 1 ending with a cliffhanger of the Enterprise going back in time. So there you go. They trimmed it down to make it a 1-parter and just kept the name, essentially. The ending was revised so to be a standalone episode. What would have been a 2-part eventually became another standalone episode. Tomorrow is Yesterday. That's interesting. So I'll be looking forward to seeing that there and looking at that episode with the Naked Time on my mind. Like as I say, if you're a fan of Star Trek now, these days, and you come across it on TV, like you're going to be getting it in goodness knows what order. Like there's so many shows we have been checking out lately. Me and my brother, we tend to sit down, watch an episode of a show every evening while we're having dinner. And we're actually watching the A-Team there at one point. He's like me, he likes all the old classic stuff, and I think that's where I get a lot of it from as well. And watching the A-Team, and just, you're sitting there watching a show, and for me, sometimes I get curious about something, and of course I'll bring out IMDb and have a look at that there. And that show, while we were watching it, it was badly out of sequence. It's almost as if like the channel that was putting the show out was literally just, they had a stock of episodes sitting in a corner, and they just left it and put a random episode on at one point, and then just like tick it off, and just absolutely no order in it whatsoever. So I don't even know how the heck I ended up going down that A-Team tangent, but yes, Star Trek, that's great. I absolutely love it. This episode is fantastic. What else did I come across in the research for this? The Naked Time is the only episode of the original series in which the rank of Lieutenant Junior grade was ever shown or referenced to. The insignia on the sleeve for that rank is a single broken stripe. Joseph Tormalin was the only member of the Enterprise crew ever to be shown wearing it. So that's interesting. You need to remember that this is only episode 4 and a run of a show, which at that point, after having one pilot episode that was rejected, they put on a second pilot episode, and the show was picked up through a favour, more or less. It's just somebody that was in the know, had a bit of clout, believed in the show, got the company to actually take it on for a series. So episode 4 in season 1 of the original show, they probably didn't think that they were going to get a season 2. Like they got a season 1. So there's a lot of stuff on there that'll change over time, and continuity kind of falls out here and there whenever you're doing something new and you don't know if you're going to get anywhere with it. So it is what it is, guys. Absolutely fantastic little episode. And if you've never checked it out, definitely do, and let me know how you get on with the view screen of the Enterprise in this episode, because it did make me dizzy for a while during the middle of this episode. Like, every time they showed it and it was getting quicker and quicker, there was times I just had to look away from the screen. Now, in saying that, I do have a history of epilepsy, so those sorts of things, like, I tend to be wary of looking at times, just in case. Like, it's been well over 20 years at this point since I've had a seizure, but it's always in the back of your head, this stuff might happen again one day. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a little bit of a written review on whatever podcast provider you're listening to this on, and please share the show along to anybody that you feel may enjoy it. And I will talk to you on Tuesday coming with another episode of Sceam Me Up Botty. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.